Hi, this is TapCat. Welcome to part 7 of my Civilization 5 Brave New World tutorial. My intent is that this will be the last installment that I spend on the Greece playthrough. I did decide to go for a diplomatic victory type. And what I want to do is just a quick look at how the mid and late game went. Now, I would take more time with it, but the purpose of this series is not really to show you minute by minute gameplay, but to talk about the major decisions and, how I arrived at them and things like that, so that you will know what to do when you play. But honestly, there weren't really very many hard choices to make. I am going to go through some of the key points, but really the hard work was already done. This is what I has said repeatedly in the early installments. And from here, it really was just following through on a course of action and taking steps that, mostly are fairly obvious, straight through. So the first thing I want to show is where we were relative to, the rest of the game at this point in time. So here you can see that while we're only 5th in literacy, we are actually quite close to the leader. And the only things we're really low on are approval, and that's fine. We can get our happiness up. This is something that I prioritize, actually. And then also our armed forces. Well, again, I know that I haven't really been focusing on our armed forces, and that is something that I gradually build up from here. We only have one neighbor who can really get to us. She's not a military power, and the terrain made it just as awkward for her to come after us as it was for us to go after her. So what does all that boil down to? It means I'm actually very happy with where we are, because economically and things of that sort, we're fine. And we're actually more than fine. And the things that we're a little weaker on, it's okay for us to be weaker on at this point. So where are we going to go from here? Well, number one, you can see I'm already researching astronomy. And the reason I'm doing that is I really want to get out of this mode of having to hug the shore. We need to start sending ships across the ocean. So astronomy, and then as soon as possible moving into navigation, that will allow me to do that. We need to start finding other civilizations and, almost more importantly, city-states. Because if we're going to win a diplomatic victory, we have to start discovering these guys. Another area that I also started focusing on is gold production. Because for obvious reasons, if I'm going to try to curry favor with all these city-states, yes, I will absolutely, fulfill quests if I can. But I need financial resources in order to do it. Besides making more gold, we also want to push into the patronage social policy tree to make it easier to build favor with city-states. Consulates is a great first pick because it'll increase our starting point with civilizations we meet by 20. Now, while we're at it, we're going to go ahead and offer protection to all of the ones we meet. So that'll get us to a starting point of 25. And when you consider you only need 30 to get to friends, that's pretty darn good. But patronage isn't the only important social policy tree. Science is going to be critical for us, so I am hitting rationalism as well. Inevitably, when we went out and started exploring, we did encounter other civilizations. As you can see, Montezuma is in the game, and we also met Genghis Khan of Mongolia, Poland, Siam, and Gandhi. Now, this also allowed me to address one of the things that I wanted to prioritize, which was shoring up my happiness. I wasn't able to trade for luxuries with every single one of them, but I certainly was able to with some. And at 4 happiness a clip, you don't need a million of those. It racks up really quickly. I do recommend you do that as soon in the game as you can, because what tends to happen is that if you don't tie up that luxury, one of the other AI-controlled civilizations will. And once those trades are locked in, those resources don't free up again that often. Once we had some gold in our pockets, I started looking for opportunities to get more city-state allies. My first priority was for cultured city-states, because that would help us get more social policies faster. And so one way I did that was wait for one to have a quest where your gold bought you more influence. So you can see here, Kabul had one, and we were able to give him 500 gold and get over the top. And one of the great things about Greece is that you lose influence a lot more slowly than other cultures. And if you dip farther into the patronage social policy tree, there's a policy in there that slows that loss down even more, so that once you build that influence, it goes away only very slowly. Because Mongolia has a 30% bonus when attacking city-states and their units, I figured it was pretty likely that the AI would, crush as many city-states as possible. So I wanted to at least weaken Mongolia as soon as I could. After all, I rely on city-states, not just for the votes in the World Congress that I'll need to win the game later, but also for the bonuses to, all the different categories that they offer. So since I had the honor of making the first proposal to the World Congress, I just went straight for an embargo of Mongolia. It also didn't take long for my fears to be justified, because in fact he was attacking the city-state of If and had already conquered another one. Now at this point, I wasn't ready to openly declare war on him because my military was still fairly weak. But what I did do is put some units next to If and just try to get in the way a little bit. Unfortunately, as I was building up my navy to go to war with Mongolia, I got a little careless and left several of them in one area down on the southeastern border. He noticed that and challenged me, and asked whether or not my intention was to declare war or not. Now, I really did not want to declare at that point, but I also didn't want to take the, warmonger liars penalty with every other civilization in the game. So it pained me to do it, but I went ahead and just fessed up and declared war. It was a tough break because it gave him, that first turn initiative to attack me instead of it being the other way around. But overall, it was worth it. If I had it to do over, I would have just been more careful about where I placed my units, though. Because I was not truly ready to declare war, though, I decided to see if I could get some help. So I talked to Montezuma. Now, he wasn't willing to do it for nothing. I had to make a trade. But when I asked him what he wanted to declare war, his demands really were not that extreme. Now, I couldn't really see my way clear to spare the iron that he wanted, because I did want to build a number of frigates and privateers, because that was the only way I was realistically going to get at Mongolia myself. But once I removed that, he went ahead and accepted that as a counteroffer, and we had a deal. So this was pretty huge for me because it gave me, a man on the ground with a very large army to take a lot of heat off of me. My number one priority in this war was to free the city-state of Colombo that Mongolia had taken. Now here again, Montezuma proved to be a worthwhile ally because he was already attacking it on the ground and had weakened the walls substantially before I took my first shot. So it was really just almost child's play to use my frigates to finish battering them down and then move in with my privateer and take it. So that was really nice. It gave me a chance to free the city-state with, no losses whatsoever on my side and weaken him in the process. Needless to say, rescuing them also made Colombo my latest city-state ally. And of course, that also suited my needs perfectly because I was trying to gather as many of them as I possibly could anyway. From there, we moved on to Mongolia's capital. Now, I wasn't really that interested in taking on a bunch of cities on this continent, but it was important to me to significantly reduce his power, and attacking his capital certainly seemed like an obvious way to do that. At this point, he had also knocked Poland out of the game entirely. He had taken both Warsaw and Krakow, and one of the ideas that I had was trying to capture Krakow from him because it was on the coastline, and then just as I freed the city-state, I would free that. And so that would put another civilization back into the mix on this continent and hopefully provide at least a minor counterweight to Mongolia's influence. So we went about positioning our ships and attacking Karakorum. One advantage we had in this war is that they didn't really have much of a navy. There were some ships at the beginning, but we were able to kill those off. But unfortunately, the walls of his capital in particular were strong enough that my frigates were not that effective. Now, because we were largely unopposed in the water, I did have time. I could just keep hammering away. And we did have a number of ships. That also helped a lot. But there's no question this was going to be a slow process. Long before we had his walls breached, though, Genghis Khan ended up coming to me and offering a peace deal. Now, I did really want some gold with it, but he wouldn't go for that. But he did offer me Krakow, which was the city I was going to take from him anyway. Since I didn't really want to take and hold his capital, I was really okay using, this peace treaty as leverage to get the city that I did want. Now, it is kind of funny because I went to all this trouble and I didn't keep anything from that continent. But I didn't really want one or two cities sitting way over on the other side of the world that I couldn't defend from aggressive neighbors like Montezuma and Genghis Khan anyway. So I took the deal, I was happy with it, and from this point forward, I really just focused on the diplomatic side of the game and building votes in the World Congress. Now, how did we do that? Well, obviously, what you need to do is form as many alliances with city-states as you can. Now, the kind of brute force method is to just shower city-states with gold. And I certainly did do that. However, you want to be smart about it. So, as often as possible, give them gold when they have a quest that will leverage that gift into you getting more influence. Also, if they have something like a trade route quest, then by all means go ahead and send a trade route there if you can, so that you can take advantage of that. Even as a civilization like Greece, where you have significant advantages, okay, and then the patronage pool gives you even more advantages. in building or keeping influence. You know, that's great, but you want to use every arrow in the quiver. So those were the main things that I did to, just keep building that web of city-state allies. One other thing I just want to point out, you may notice in some of these clips that I'm revoking my protection of a lot of city-states. Just keep in mind, protection only helps you when you don't already have influence with a city-state. It adjusts the resting point. But once you've become friends with them or allies or whatever, then the only thing that keeping protection in place does is it creates the potential for friction between you and other civilizations. If they bully that city-state, you either have to take a diplomatic hit with that other civ, or if you don't scold them, your city-state friend gets mad at you. So it's kind of a lose-lose scenario. So by all means, offer the protection and, do that. But then once it's not really needed anymore, shut it down. One pretty obvious need if you are going to give city-states a lot of gold is that you need to earn a lot first. So what we did is we swapped out all of our land-based trade routes for cargo ships and sent them to the most profitable cities we could find. I also did things like, trading my eggs as luxuries away for gold because our happiness was pretty well taken care of at that point. Closest I came to being in a war again is that Siam and China, my two closest neighbors, were a little stronger than I would have preferred. So what I actually did is I went to Siam and bribed him into declaring war on China. And it worked out pretty well. I think it kept both of them busy and weakened them both a bit. Neither one became dominant. A lot of times that's a good alternative to going to war yourself. If you've ever watched any of my Civ 5 playthroughs, then you know I'm a huge fan of science in general, and this playthrough was no exception. I really wanted to get to globalization before the first vote for world leader, and one way to try to make that happen was to push toward plastics and research labs. Now, a related trick on that front is if you generate a great scientist and you're anywhere near to getting plastics, don't build an academy and don't go ahead and just use them up for the one-time science output. Not yet. Just keep them basically at rest until you've built the research labs. 8 turns later, then go ahead and use them. The reason why is that when a great scientist is born, the amount of science he'll generate is not fixed. It's always based on the most recent 8 turns of science output, and it goes up a lot when you build the research labs. So you can get way more mileage out of those great people. Aside from getting to globalization as quickly as possible, there were a number of benefits I was looking for by going into science. One was that it would help keep our military competitive or even superior to anyone else in case they started thinking about invading us. I knew no one could have better technology than us, more powerful individual units. The other thing it does, you're always the first one to unlock wonders. Well, not always, but most of the time. And so it allowed me to pursue a lot of wonders. Not necessarily ones that were critical, but ones that were nice to have. The only one that I really felt I needed was Neuschwanstein, because among other things, it adds significantly to your gold. But because we didn't have a ton of priorities that we had to chase all at once, I had the luxury of building a lot of wonders in the late game. And it wasn't just a plus for me, it was that I kept other civilizations from being able to build them instead. One area of the game that didn't end up being as important as I thought it would were social policies and ideology. I went into Freedom primarily to get a tier 3 tenant that gives you more influence for each trade route you have with a city-state. But it's not that that wasn't good or that social policies like rationalism and patronage aren't good. It's just that by this point in the game, what had happened is I'd already locked in literally every city-state as my ally, and I was the leading producer of science beakers each turn. So, you know, rationalism and freedom and like these are great. It just ended up not really being a deciding factor as far as me winning or losing. Patronage the same way. It's like, it's awesome, but it was kind of late. So it doesn't mean I would do anything different. It's just you would have to be in a game that was more down to the wire for it to be a key factor. The end game was definitely anticlimactic. And I'm glad it wasn't a Let's Play series because I'm afraid, you know, the later chapters would have been kind of dull. I got to the point where the UN was founded on turn 322. And when we had to vote for a host, I had 40 votes that I could cast for myself. Now, note that to elect a world leader, the threshold was 40 votes. So if I could have held the election right then, I would have won on turn 322. Unfortunately, it wasn't until turn 349. In the meantime, let me see, on turn 330, we finished researching globalization. So I had, you know, that in my back pocket as well. I picked up 4 extra votes by sending delegates to other civilizations. The main benefit of that is just that if on the AI turn, like if it's just before the vote is cast, one of them peels off a city-state or two, then you don't have the votes anymore to win. And you don't get a chance to get them back, you know, before you have to cast your votes. So it didn't necessarily need globalization to win, but it definitely, you know, helped me relax a little bit and have some confidence that we would get over the top. I should also just add that if you didn't have literally every city-state as your ally, then you would flat out need globalization. And that is very possible. One, you know, like one of your competitors could just have a sky-high influence with someone that you can't overcome. So maybe it took a little while, but the day did come and the world leader election was upon us. I, of course, cast every one of our votes for Greece. Nothing bad had happened. I still had all 44. We only needed 40. And so no great surprise that once the turn passed and came back around, we got the notification that we had won the game. So all was right with the world and we could begin celebrating in earnest. Taking a look at the demographics, we ended up really right where I wanted to be. Our military score was number 3, and all I wanted was a really good deterrent. I wasn't trying to take anybody on. And likewise, being number 1 in literacy, you know, that was very important to me. Other than that, I just wanted to be respectable, really. And I would definitely say in any category that mattered, we achieved that. In terms of our overall game score, we did not end up lighting anything on fire. Pacifist playthroughs usually don't. I would have had to have built a lot more wonders or conquered people. That's actually usually the best way. But I wasn't playing this game for score. I was playing to achieve a diplomatic victory. And we did that at the earliest turn possible, pretty much. So, you know, I am more than comfortable with that outcome. We're going to close things out by showing you a replay of the game on the map so you can see the ebb and flow of the other civilizations. Let me just bring this thing full circle and point out something, and it should be obvious. I am showing you how I approached just one particular victory condition type for the mid to late game. The whole point of this series was to try to establish how critical that first 100, 150 turns are. And that if you play well in that segment, and if you aggressively grow your capital and start new cities, you build a power base that you can then pursue a variety of victory conditions from. If you look at this game, I think it's very clear we could have won a science victory if that's what we wanted to do. Now, I decided to go for diplomacy, and, so much the better. I would even say that if you really wanted to, you could probably go domination as well, but the geography was really your enemy there. A lot of the civilizations are very far away. They're not all, where they have their capitals on the coast. So you would really just have to want to do it for its own sake rather than taking the low-hanging fruit, that's for sure. But hopefully this series will be of some help to you and, showed something that perhaps you didn't know before. At any rate, that is all for now. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you next time.